Well, all right. Welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast, Kevin and Chuck. Today, well, we thought we'd do something a little different. It's October. Halloween is fast approaching. Thought we'd talk about horror movies. And in particular, it is the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast. So we thought we'd talk about how to survive a horror movie. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I watch a horror movie, sometimes the poor choices that people make can be a little frustrating. And you're just like, no, that's the worst thing you could do. You're an idiot. And yeah, that's kind of what's happening. And we actually thought that perhaps this could even apply to some real life decisions that people make, because it turns out people make some really bad choices when people just seem to give up, seems to really be the answer. But anyway, Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Well, there's a lot of horror movies that, a lot of different types of horror movies, and you always see the person like running upstairs past their front door when the person's chasing them, or, any of those stupid decisions they make. They think they knock the guy unconscious and then, run away instead of just, dropping a brick on his head or something. There's always something stupid that's going on in those horror movies. Now, don't get me wrong, I love horror movies. It's just a little embarrassing. I feel bad for all those big boob girls that are, that are all getting butchered because they made poor decisions. If they listen to the podcast, we can give you some pointers. If you're a girl with big boobs, or you like to drink alcohol or do drugs, then this is the podcast for you, because you're in a horror movie. You're doomed. You
need every opportunity to
right.
All right. So we had a little discussion. You mentioned that there were several types of horror movies. Like, what's the breakdown?
Yeah. So let's run through a couple of them. So, well, let's just start on the list here. The first one I want to touch on is the paranormal horror movies. So those are movies like Poltergeist. Do you remember that one with Carol Ann going into the light? Yes. So now, the thing with poltergeists is, they only happen in one spot. So all you got to do is just leave. You know what I mean? It's that house that's buried, that's built on top of the cemetery, that's infested with ghosts and shit. Yeah, just go.
When you're paying the mortgage, do you really want to walk away from that?
That's a lot of equity you're losing.
Do you feel like guilt, as you're like, well, I feel guilty that I'm going to sell it to the next guy and not say, hey, you're going to get murdered when you buy this house. But
yeah, you might get sucked into the TV, so just be careful.
The TV, that's what happens, huh? What about The Ring, right? That's that same kind of. I feel like she was a ghost and whatever.
Yeah, that was a spooky ass movie. Yeah, that was one of the better ones, I thought. That was that was I don't know. That one freaked me out a little bit.
Right. Now,
to be honest with you.
Apparently Ghostbusters is the exception. Is that right? To the whole poltergeist where they're
That's
not
right.
really...
If you have a photon blaster, what are those things called that they trap the ghosts with?
Oh yeah, I don't even know maybe that's it. We need to get into the technology of that whole sixth sense episode. I can't talk this morning that we did. That might be able to pay off there. You sense the stuff before it happens.
Exactly.
All right, so what are your thoughts? What you can do? You're basically saying you pretty much got to leave the area, let the ghosts have it.
Right. I mean, there's another option that comes up a lot in these movies is you got to get the priests over there. Yeah. Okay, to get a priest. It can't just be like a regular minister. You can't be like, a rabbi or any of that stuff. It has to be a legitimate Catholic priest. They're the only ones that can solve your problems. And that leads us on to the next genre of movie, which is the demonic possession. And these ones kind of freak me out a little bit too. So we're talking about like movies like The Exorcist, you know?
Yeah.
Where
And
the
there's a lot
demon,
of vomit with the movies like this.
right?
Where
Yeah,
you're
head
just,
spinning around, yeah, all that stuff, man. Pea soup shooting out at everybody.
yeah, it's always thick and green. That's right.
Yeah. No, so that's the game plan here. You got to get a priest when you're possessed with demons. Got to have somebody exorcise it. You know, and those ones kind of freak me out because of all the movies, that's the only, like, I don't believe in ghosts, I don't believe in magic, any of that stuff. But I don't know, those demon possession ones freak me out because that one might be real.
Yeah, that's and they're like, oh, and that's the thing. Like, I think the horror movie that wins are the ones that have like a some bit of truth, some event that ended up leaving a bunch of bodies in reality, and you're
Right,
like,
right.
oh, what happened there, Well, that tell me about that. Now we have some of these historic ones. Isn't that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Wasn't that supposed to be an event? Or
Right.
was
So
that
that's
just bullshit? I
so
don't know.
let's talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre because that's under slasher. So we're
All
on to the
right.
slasher films now. Um, so Texas Chainsaw Massacre, yes, technically it's based on a real event, but it's based on the same dude that, you remember that movie Silence of the Lambs, Buffalo Bill, that was making the human suit,
Yes, yes.
right? And then there was Psycho with Norman Bates, and he was the taxidermist that had his dead mother in the house, all
Right?
based on the same guy. So it
Oh
was
yeah.
Ed Gein was the name of him. He was in Wisconsin, and what he would do is he'd dig up bodies and he'd like take their parts and use them for stuff. But he was really bad at it. Like he made a couch out of human skin, but there's still like fat and stuff stuck on it. Like when they went in and found his house, it just stunk of like rotting flesh. Like he wasn't good
Nice.
at like tanning the hides or anything. You
Right.
know what I mean? He made a belt out of nipples. He had a full like body suit, like woman body suit, and he'd run around in his backyard singing and banging a tambourine at night. But the thing is, he only killed 2 people and he used a rifle. So it was in Wisconsin, not Texas. It
Right.
was a rifle, not a chainsaw.
How do
And
you
it was
get that
only 2
much
people, so it
skin?
wasn't really a massacre at all.
How do you get that much skin out of 2 people? They were fat
Well,
people.
he was digging people up. That
Oh,
was his
okay.
thing. He started
Body.
digging people up, and then he started killing people, and that's
It's
when
like
they
it's
caught him.
going to be better with fresh, right? Now, I am seeing that if you can't really go to the see, there were some comments about pedophiles, and
Right,
and
right.
that's why the whole thing with priests, and you can't go to a priest if you're the pedophile, but maybe that's when the priests are like, hey, I can relate.
Right. Oh, your
And-
kid is possessed by a demon? I'll take care of this. You just stay outside, Mom and Dad. I'll take care of your son here. We'll get this figured out.
We'll straight. You just leave him with us for a week or two.
Right.
Some disturbing shit out there. Now, Freddy Krueger, he comes into the whole. That's basically a good moral movie where you're learning about, hey, don't treat your neighbors like shit, because then
Right. Don't light your neighborhood pedophile on fire, because then he's going to come back for you, for your
and
kids.
go for your kids. Right.
Yep.
Now that's a lot where you had concerns about the large-breasted girls and their drinking habits. I feel like that's one of the go-tos with that, where like the
Right.
epitome of, because that's one of the foundation horror movies. I feel like
Right. So there's the basic slasher movies, and those are all the ones we grew up with. Halloween and
Right.
Friday the 13th, and those movies where it's like really counts on that. It's really the body count. You know what I mean? Like if you get up in the teens, you're really making a quality movie. You know?
If you're going to a camp with Crystal Lake, just watch out, because there's a lot of Crystal Lake camps out there.
There are. Don't have sex there. You know what I mean?
No.
Stay away from the booze. Stay away from the drugs. And you might be okay. But it's a thing. At some point you have to change. And if the camera happens to be there, or
Don't do it.
Michael Myers is standing outside of the window and you don't realize, and you take your shirt off to change clothes, you're done. You screwed up. Make sure your blinds are closed, the lights are out. Those people, they call them never nudes, where they never want to be naked. You know, they'll take a shower with their bathing suit on type stuff. Those are the only people that'll survive those
That'll
movies.
make it through there.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Now, I want to talk real quick about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We kind of skipped past
before
that.
We go over. Okay.
If you want to survive those types of slasher movies, all you have to do is have a gun. You know what I mean? You're in Texas. The dude has a chainsaw.
Stay strapped
if you have a gun, that movie's over.
All right.
It's only like 5 minutes long. I don't understand it. Why is there always a group of people traveling through Texas unarmed, entirely unarmed? It's ridiculous.
Nice.
But I don't know.
That only makes explanation sense. I feel like the gun is the answer to a lot of horror movie problems. Really,
90% of horror movies.
It kind of feels like you got to be a 2A advocate if you want to live. Basically,
right?
I mean, that just makes perfect sense. Biden and them. You don't need it kind of takes me back to Governor Cuomo in New York. You don't need an AR-15 to shoot a deer, but maybe you do for a serial killer, right? Or a horror movie guy.
Mm-hmm.
So now, where does Chucky come into all this?
Chucky is kind of on the fence between like a slasher movie and a monster movie because he's not really a monster. You know what I mean? He's just a little
cute, lovable doll, right?
Yeah.
And actually, he kind of covers them all because you got slasher, you got possession, right? Wasn't he possessed from like a serial killer?
Yep, exactly.
Somebody was getting the chair and
a genre-crossing movie. That right there.
Oh, that's classy right there. If you can nip it all in there. If we only had some truth to it to tie it together, like a real event, Yeah.
So Chucky, how would you survive a Chucky attack? What do you think, man?
A Chucky attack. So I think I heard some of your theories. One, I feel like I can outrun a doll.
Right, you can just walk.
You walking is like a doll running, right? I also feel like we could possibly, the gun comes back into play, but shooting a doll probably doesn't have the same effect as shooting flesh. I don't know. Are there chicken feathers everywhere?
Well, that's right. If you remember the end of Chucky, they shoot him a couple of times and stuffing comes out, but it's because you have to shoot him in the heart. In the end, they shot him in the heart and blood splattered everywhere, and that's what finally killed him in the first movie. It just keeps coming back, but that's all horror movies. And that brings us up. Chucky is kind of like the Leprechaun. Remember that movie with
the Leprechaun,
Jennifer Aniston?
It's the bad teeth that scare me.
Yeah, the bad dental hygiene.
Oh, it's just because I'm like, that guy's gonna bite me because that was the thing. Like the Leprechaun just started biting people,
Right? It's gonna get infected.
It's gonna get infected. This is where the antibiotics and the first aid training are gonna pay off. You guys need to really, be up on that, and hey, because just bad teeth. And again, short, kind of chubby. I feel like you can outrun the Leprechaun.
Yeah, same thing. He's got those little legs
on the Leprechaun, but they're angry.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's go on to monster movies. Now, there's 100 different types of horror monsters, but my favorite was always Alien with Sigourney Weaver.
Oh yeah.
Now, I never thought Sigourney Weaver was an attractive woman, but I gotta admit,
in that movie, yeah.
When I was a youngster and I saw her like at the end of the movie and she's getting in her underwear, getting ready to get in that space sleep capsule, I don't know, man. That did it for me for years. Even now, when she's like 75, she still looks good to me.
Nice, yeah. They kind of go back to her in the white underpants there, when she's getting ready, the whole thing, and you're just like, yep, I get it. I know why every teenager loved that movie. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. You're kind of like, well, all right, I'm committed. I don't know. I think what made Aliens so terrifying was, the whole, oh, my stomach hurts and the growing inside you kind of thing.
Right.
Just something going down your throat and like planting eggs or something is just, kind of a
Yeah, well, I
gross.
saw somebody talking about the making of that movie, and they said all the set designs with the alien and everything was supposed to be based on vaginas because there's nothing more terrifying to teenage boys than vaginas.
That sounds true. You know, it's funny. I actually, when I was a kid, I went to space camp,
Hmm.
and they were like, "Look, if you guys are well behaved," and we're all like, I was young. I was like, I don't know, like 12 or 13, and they
Hmm.
were like, "We have a movie for you. It may hurt your chances at wanting to go to space, but it's called Aliens. It's gonna be great." And we all watched Aliens, and we're like, "Oh my god, naked women! You know, naked Sigourney Weaver, or kind of naked." And that's the thing is, as a 12 and 13-year-old, you're like, "Yes."
Right.
So there you go.
All right.
Um, so all right, Aliens. Aliens, you just kind of need lots of firepower, right? Isn't that what Sigourney Weaver taught us? Was you just
Right.
got to
Right. The
shoot the fuck at
flamethrower was
everything?
the
Okay.
real thing, or one of those giant robotic machine suits. You know, she had that giant robot thing in
Yes.
the end. I think that was the second one at the end
And
of
that
it.
had like the whole Gatling gun. Again,
Hmm.
more proof that the Second Amendment
It's
is
important if you're going to survive.
is important. You know, I mean,
Hmm.
we should all have some kind of rotary firearms, right? You know, that
Right.
are, if you can't shoot 100 rounds a second, I don't even know why we're even living. Like, why
Yeah.
even try?
You're just wasting your life.
Yeah, no, that's just amateur hour.
Yeah. You know what you really need firepower for is the zombies. But you have to be a good shot with them. You got to get them right in the head. You got to destroy the brain. Right. So do you remember Night of the Living Dead first one from the 60s that was black and white?
Yeah.
That was a classic. That was really like that was like the first time you had zombies in a movie. There was that movie White Zombie, but that was a different kind of
Right.
zombie in that. But yeah, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. There's got to be like 30. There's got to be like 30 zombie movies at this point. You know,
Right.
big fan. I'm a big fan of zombie movies, and I think those would be, right in there with monster movies. But it's actually its own
Its
genre.
own.
I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. But the thing is, they don't develop a bad guy, and I find it hard to really be scared when they're not a developed, involved, thinking kind of enemy. I mean, I understand it's the terror is in the overwhelmingness
Hmm.
of of zombies, right? Because they just keep coming, and they're making more and more. And
Right.
that's where the fear and the horror come from. I mean, that's why people are afraid of socialists. They just keep breeding, and
Right. They just keep
yeah,
breeding and then
it,
infecting other people. Yeah, it's creepy. And every time every time the zombie wins a fight, now there's more zombies. But every time the human wins, it's just one less zombie. You know what I mean? It's
right.
every time they win, they're adding to their numbers. So I mean, it's creepy one. But what are you gonna do? You just got to
Yeah.
shoot them in the head. An axe, baseball bat. A couple of things there be pretty easy. Now, my least favorite type of horror movie is the gory horror movies. Like Saw, torture ones.
Yeah.
um, Last House. Let's see. Do you remember Evil Dead? That was a nasty one.
I
That was
remember it being out. I remember the cover. That's like Last House on the. That's like just.
yeah. And Chuck, you probably don't remember this, but the first time I watched that movie, Last House on the Left,
Yeah.
it was because you showed it to me, and I was way too young to watch that movie. It's nothing
That
but
sounds right.
like rape and like just the worst shit you get. I think somebody gets their dick bit off in it, like just awful
Oh,
things. There's a chainsaw fight, which isn't terrible, but the rest of the movie is just and I'm talking about they made a remake that was like tamed, not really that
right.
great, but the
Right.
original one with the low production value and
Yeah.
all that,
I'm
the low
seeing
budget, that was the best one.
1968 as the original. So I think that's the thing. Like we had, that's one of the things that gets lost now is Alfred Hitchcock and some of the original like hardcore suspense, creepy stuff
Right.
was where it was so much you saw less, but they told such a great story behind it that it was able to like really capture, engulf you. It's like the first 3 Star Wars movies that came out, that you had all these visions in your head. Then they came out with this digital remastered, and originally they didn't show as much of certain characters and things.
Right.
I think there was something with the big fat sloth guy thing. Who is it? I can't even remember. The one where you have Princess Leia all in the
Jabba the Hutt.
Jabba the Hutt, right? So yeah, you saw a lot less of Jabba the Hutt before the digital remaster.
Right.
There's another scene around there where Luke is like fighting some kind of horrible monster in like a sand pit that's like pulling him down in. And you didn't really see, but you were terrified because you build it up in your mind what it might be.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like you saw like little like arms of things, and
right. That was the first
out.
Alien movie too. You never really got a good look at it until the very end.
Right. And because, the technology wasn't there. But when it's in your mind, you kind of develop what your worst fears are and whatever. And then in reality, then when you see it and you're like, oh, well, that's kind of disappointing, and again, it's because it's not a real monster and we're recreating it. But we all know that technology's come a long way. They can do a pretty damn good job of getting what's in somebody's mind into reality now, at least reality on a screen,
Right. Right.
They can really show us anything they want to show us and we believe it. I mean, look, we think that Biden is the president. So, I mean, really, they can show you anything. And you're just going to be like, well, yeah, there it is.
I see somebody's talking about From Dusk Till Dawn. That is a great movie. That's George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino in that.
Yeah.
That was a classic, and that's Harvey Keitel was in that. A couple of big names in there.
Now,
vampire movies though, that's a whole different set here. So
all right, well, open it up.
My favorite vampire movie is Nosferatu. Have you ever watched that?
I have not.
It's an old movie. It's in like half of it's in like German, and like it's a weird movie. It's got to be 30s or 40s. I don't even know when that was made, but
okay.
He was a creepy vampire dude. But the trick with the vampires, we all know the rules, right? Holy water, crosses, stake in the heart, garlic, all those things. Never invite a vampire into your house, right? They can't come in unless they're invited.
That only sounds right. Is all I can say. And now garlic, does garlic work in all the vampire movies, or is that just some? Because I feel like they're always like, well, not in this movie, kind of thing. Like Lost Boys, right? I mean that.
Right, but that was them in the house in the beginning of that scene before that,
and that defeats it all.
They fed it to him, so that just like he's immune to all that shit now. So I don't know what the rules are, but I feel like they say the stake in the heart, but that was just because that's how they used to deal with real vampires back in the Middle Ages. Because what would happen is, like, some kid would get sick or something, and then he'd say that, his dead sister was appearing to him at night and sucking his life out of him. So they would go up, they would dig up the sister, and they'd look at her, and she wasn't decomposing at all. So obviously she was a vampire, undead. So they would drive a stake through her into the coffin, like pin her down so she couldn't back out, and then rebury her.
Right. Now, one of the vacations I took, I went to New Orleans, and I'll point out for those of you interested in an amazing place, it really was. Now, there was a lot of thuggery going around. The odds of somebody pulling a knife on you or pulling a gun on you, a lot higher there than your typical vacation. Probably more so than Disney World. Disney World, they're going to rob you in other ways.
Right.
Here, they're going to just be more straightforward with you.
Well, I mean, at least that's honest.
Right.
instead of charging, $18 for French fries.
Right, exactly. Here they're like, look, just give me the money now and you can enjoy the rest of your vacation, whatever. It goes more like that. So anyway, they have all these fire tours and just ghost kind of tours and things like that. And it actually not really my world, but I was like, yeah, let me check these out. And me and the wife did all these tours and you get a lot of free as well. And really was amazing. But they talked about this flu. I should have looked it up, but they talked about this sickness where people would kind of like go in a coma for a day or two. And so you had a lot of people wake up after they thought they were dead. And that's where a lot of that came from. They used to put they'd put a string and a bell in the coffin so you could kind of pull it and, let people know. They also had the very shallow graves, whatever, because of the water table there and everything. And so you had stuff coming back up. So they would find the graves that kind of like push back up through the ground and a lot of that stuff gone. So it really added to the whole movie effect. But I got to say, I feel like if you bury me and then I wake up 2 days later and I'm like, hey, and I'm able to get out because you buried me only a foot deep and I'm able to come back, I feel like I might want to kill some people.
I think I'd be a little pissed about that too.
I just had to claw my way out of a casket and come over. I feel like I might have to, drink your blood. Now, do you remember? That's what I might have to do.
Yeah, sometimes you got to drink a motherfucker's blood.
Whatever,
You buried me alive.
Exactly.
Do you remember that guy a couple of years ago? The police stopped some black dude was walking down, some old black guy was walking down the street completely naked. And the police came and arrested him. Turns out he was escaped from a morgue. He was dead in a morgue. And then he woke up on the table and just was like, what the fuck? Get out of here. I'm getting out of here. So turns out he did die last year. And he was actually dead at that point. Like dead. So
so we
don't have to worry about him coming back now. But I mean, sometimes they come back.
Yeah, exactly.
Now
you handle it.
One of my favorite horror movies, one of my favorite new one, my favorite types of horror movies are the psychological horror movies. So that's like The Shining. The Shining is a classic, obviously. Jack Nicholson, love that movie. And all work and no play makes Johnny a dull boy. The Shining is really one of the best horror movies, in my opinion, that's been made ever.
And again, that's that whole classic, I feel like also, you get the original ideas. You get to kind of be the breakthrough when you back in the day. But I don't know, man, they're just countless different ideas. There's some creative motherfuckers out there. And, I'd rather they get their sick ideas out on film than, go and enact these in reality. Now, what's your take on for all the soccer moms out there? Are these movies inspiring? Do you watch these movies and be like, hey, I'm going to skip going to the dentist and I'm going to go around biting legs of little kids? Is that something that occurs to you or what?
Yeah, sometimes when I watch those movies, that's all I can think about is putting an axe in somebody or, I'd like to go on one of those Michael Myers rampages. Thing is, though, in Halloween, the Michael Myers one, they shot him like 15 times and he just kept coming back. And I don't know, man, maybe I could take 1 or 2 rounds, but I think after that, that's it, man. My axe swinging days are over.
Now, I feel like had one of these body armor companies reached out to us for sponsorship, this would have been their opportunity right now. I could have been plugging somebody and no, the window's closed. So
yeah, if you're going to go on a rampage, man, you're going to need some sort of body armor for sure. For sure. Now, one of my favorite genres of movie are the folk horror movies. Now, those are, do you ever see the movie The Wicker Man? Not the one with Jack, not the one with, what's his name? I'm blanking on it. The original Wicker Man had Christopher Lee in it. Now, Christopher Lee was in 90% of the horror movies that came out from 1960 to 1980.
Okay.
But basically, this virgin guy gets this puritanical policeman gets called up to this island in Scotland, right, to solve a missing child case. But it turns out it was just a ruse, man. And they're all pagans, and they basically build this Wicker Man where they make sacrifices in it. You know, they put farm animals in there and food and people, and they light the whole shit on fire and burn them up. You know, and it makes a good harvest the next year. You can't argue with the results. Right. You know, got to do something to make sure that corn keeps growing.
I don't know why you wouldn't. Now,
and
corn,
then there's children of the corn.
Yes, that's where I was going to go. It's the creepy eyes and the blonde hair. You just know, you're like, no, those little blonde haired kids. Nope. You know,
I'll tell you right now, I never trust a blonde haired, blue eyed albino looking kid ever.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
No, don't trust
that
them.
Walking around, it's just terror, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. Now, I also, let me circle back. We had mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger, right?
Right.
Have you seen Dee Snider's Strangeland?
Oh, yeah.
Now, that's a whole other level.
Right.
So, apparently, the bad guy in this movie is Dee Snider, who I have to say is amazing in this movie. And this movie, totally underrated. Like, it just never went anywhere.
Right.
But it was pretty classy. And the best part of it was that Freddy Krueger was like the scapegoat for the whole movie. It was Robert Englund, right? It's the guy who plays Freddy
that's
Krueger.
Right. Yeah.
And so he was like a former, like, convicted sex offender or something, you know, pedophile, I think. And the whole town was like just ready to, you know, they tried to lynch him. I don't even remember if they do or not. They might have even lynched him, but they were sure he was the problem in the town. And it turns out it was Dee Snider the whole time. But he's putting these girls up, sticking catheters in them, and it's just some gross shit. And sewing their lips shut. I think that's the cover of the thing. He's
right.
But it was all about, like, Dee's like, when I saw an interview with him, and he's like, yeah, I just want to teach kids not to talk to people on the internet that are, you know, strangers.
Yeah,
and
that was
that's
his
the
thing.
whole thing. Because
that
was, you know, like, basically the plot of the movie is like teenage girls who are like, hee. And that's the thing. Like, the guy becomes the horrible villain to kind of show them, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. So look what could happen to you. Somebody could put you in my basement for days. And
right. But the real story of that, the real, like, lesson you learn from that is, you know, he was all into, like, body modification in that movie.
Yes.
You know, like piercing and tattoos and stuff. Just don't trust people with tattoos, you know?
Yes.
If they've got a piercing in their face, stay away from them.
I also don't let them
sew your lips shut.
Like, you know, I might go out with a girl with, like, a nose piercing or something, but you're not going to be my banker. You know, I'm going to walk in and go, nope.
I'm not getting a loan from you.
Nope. This isn't going to happen. You know, they're always like, let me give you some financial advice. I'm like, look, I've seen the decisions that you've made, and I'm going to have to go with, that's a no-go, you know?
Right.
Earlier on in the comments on the side, somebody pointed out, because of horror movies, we got all the fantasy outfits,
right?
You know, so there are some upsides.
Yeah, I did once date a girl that would, like, cosplay as a vampire all the time.
Yes,
I thought it was kind of hot. Then she bit my neck, like,
and then you're like, whoa, hey,
real blood. Like, I had to check the next morning when I went out into the light. I, like, kind of put my hand out there first to make sure I wasn't gonna burn up. Like, I don't know what's going on.
You tested it out
just to make sure. You know what I mean? I
right.
don't know what the rules are in real life. I mean, I don't know. I never expected to get bit by somebody, though. So,
all right.
What are you gonna do?
Let's circle back to vampires here. Now, what do we do if we are all right? We're exposed to a vampire. It's too late now. We have all the negatives of a vampire aside of the live forever thing,
Right.
which would obviously be a positive, right? I mean, it's a
Hmm.
given. But so tell me about, do they what can we do? Like
Well,
how
there's a
do we
couple
get
of,
around the sunlight thing, right? That's for one.
right. First, you gotta have the coffin. You know what I mean?
Okay.
You gotta have some really seals up.
And
Seals up
again,
good.
this is where all our episodes on the secret room and the secret, hidden vaults, that
Right.
kind of stuff is really going to come into play.
Yeah, you need some sort of a safe room where you can keep your coffin. You don't want to like wake up in the middle of the day with some Van Helsing driving a stake through your heart. You got to be hard to
Right.
find,
Right. Now, and you don't really want to lead everybody back to your place or tip them off unless like you're sure you're going to, close the deal, right? Like
Right.
if you're taking the virgins home, you need to be able to close the deal because otherwise,
Right. Well, a lot of those vampires, they got that like voodoo. They got like those voodoo eyes, where they look at girls in the eyes and then they get all confused and hypnotized.
woo. Yeah, that sounds right. You're captivating, right? You suck them
Right.
in. No, that sounds right. All right. So you bring them home. You got them. Now they also a good guard dog, right? That's another takeaway for vampires.
Right. Some
They
sort of a
have those
hellhound.
a hellhound, right? To kind of keep the shop going in the daytime, that kind of thing.
That's
Now,
right.
what about like this subservient caretaker who's like, hey, I couldn't find a better job, some kind of Alfred, basically,
Right.
like to your Batman, who's going to be like, hey, I'll handle the day. Like,
Somebody's got to do the grocery shopping. You know what I mean?
right.
Somebody's got to go to the store during the daytime. Somebody's got to, operate the bank accounts. Banks aren't open after dark.
Now Walmart is 24 hours a day, but I feel like the banks and stuff, there is online banking, but no, I hear you. I
Yeah.
think you got something there.
Yeah. So that's tricky. You got to have somebody, that can go out and grab your. You got to have some sort of a dark robe and all that sort of weird stuff. It's kind of like vampire gear is kind of the same as like swinger gear. Like you got to have like bathrobes and like dark lighting and candles and stuff, and it's the same kind of creepy pervert stuff that swingers do. The vampires got to operate in the same kind of manner.
Okay. Now, is there something about pineapples in swingers? I'm not really sure what's going on there. Have you seen this? No?
What? Say that again?
Pineapples in swingers? No? Okay.
Oh yeah,
No, there is.
it's a
Okay.
big deal now. Yeah,
All right.
upside down
So
pineapple means that you're open for business.
that's how that works? Okay.
Yeah,
'Cause
you
I
have a
keep seeing
pineapple
it
on your
the
door, and when you
internet,
turn
I'm
it
like, what does
upside
that mean?
down, that means
means
anybody can come
shop's
in
open?
and party.
Really? Because they're always like, oh, I go to a campground and they're not okay with pineapples. And I'm like, what? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, don't trust those people in RVs. Don't trust those people with the campers, man. Either they're gonna try and kill you, or they're gonna try and have sex with you.
Wait, who's counting the confetti?
They have to count. They have to count things.
Who?
That's one of their curses. The vampires' curses.
Vampires count?
They have to count things. Yeah.
It's like
I don't
Dracula.
understand where that came
It's in
from.
Sesame
But yeah, if you throw
Street?
confetti on the ground, they have to stop and count out all the little pieces of confetti
Okay.
so you can get
All right.
away.
Sorry, I was trying to follow. I that's new to me, but that's
kinda-
explaining a lot of Sesame Street.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's kind of fucked up though, because how does it happen with what was that vampire movie where they're all like had glitter and shit on them?
Yes.
It was some sort of teen
Twilight.
romance one.
Twilight.
Twilight, right?
Yeah.
And they were all glittery.
That
But
doesn't
it seems
count
like
as
that
a horror
fucks
movie.
up the whole.
Like, now, what about the whole American Werewolf series?
Oh yeah. Now, those were good movies. Those are pretty gory stuff.
I think American Werewolf in London. Yeah, that was the go-to.
Mm-hmm.
But because they always had like really hot chicks in that one. And
Right.
in the werewolf movies. I was like, oh well, that's
Yeah,
kind of
American Werewolf
interesting. I
in
like the.
Paris was a mediocre part 2 on that, but it
I
wasn't a terrible movie.
no, I now
No,
that's the thing though. I feel like people wouldn't get into horror movies or that except for the lure of hot chicks. Like
right.
I feel like there's always and is there some kind of hey, maybe you shouldn't be sucked into hot chicks because you might get murdered or stabbed in the eye or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're just as likely with fat girls. You know,
It's the same
just
thing.
as yeah, just
Yeah,
as
okay.
likely to stab you as anybody
Okay.
else.
All right. So yeah, just stay away from women is really the
Just women
takeaway.
in general.
All right.
Yep. Now, the last one I wanted to touch on, the last type of horror movie, is the comedic horror movies.
Okay.
Now,
Scream?
have you ever seen Shaun of the Dead with Simon Pegg?
Yes. Yes.
That's a classic right there. Now, you really just have to be super aggressive. If you're in a comedic horror movie, yeah, just be super violent. Nothing's gonna happen to you. It's a comedy. You know what I mean? You just gotta smash heads and Army of Darkness.
Yes, that's where I was going in my head. I'm like, Army of Darkness is the one that comes to mind. And
Yeah, that is a great movie. And I actually watched that one last night to get prepped for this
get
this
pumped
show.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you see him, he's got the chainsaw hand, he's got the shotgun. He's just super aggressive when it comes to that stuff, smashing witches, chopping witches' heads off with axes and things.
What is the new one that I just watched like 3 or 5 years ago? That's like the last time I watched a horror movie. Dale and whatever, the two cousins or whatever.
Oh yeah, something Dale and I don't know. They fight evil.
Yeah, that one was pretty great. If you're like trying to ease into the horror movie, that's probably your go-to right there. The other thing, like fear.com. Now that's like a whole. Now it's funny because I was trying to get my sister to watch a horror movie, so we watched fear.com. But the problem was it was like a little creepy for her, and it ended up making it more terrifying because we would watch it in like 10-minute increments. Like we would watch it and she'd be like, that's it, we got to shut it off. And then the next day, all right, let's do it again. We'd watch 10 more minutes.
That's too much.
Nope. And every time you're like, oh shit, that's some fucked up.
Yeah.
So
Tucker and Dale versus Evil is the one you're talking about. I had to look it up real quick.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
That was 2010, so it was 12 years ago that movie came out. It's not a new one.
Not a new one. And yeah, no, that was classy right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean Tarantino with his the ones we were just talking about, the vampire movies, there's some good stuff out there. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with going back to, Hitchcock and the classics, The Birds and Psycho. And, all these, just like I said, that kind of hidden fear and just where the character kind of really sells it. That's pretty awesome. Now, Freddy was terrifying. I mean, I was terrified. The whole furnace that just looked like it was going to eat you kind of thing the whole time, constantly going back to the furnace stoking up. You're like, oh, that ain't going to be good,
Yeah. I think I saw Nightmare on Elm Street. I was probably way too young to watch it. But you remember when Johnny Depp went up on the roof, right? And his guts were all coming out? And
yeah. It's the lure of boobs. And they had some pretty young girls and stuff in that movie back in the day. And that was when you're 14, you're like, yep, that's right. That's the movie for me.
Yeah, I remember watching Halloween 2. Halloween 2 was lot of big jugs in that one. And I remember watching it as a youngster, and my friend's mom said we could watch it. But as soon as boobs showed up, that was it. The movie was over. Nope. She was turning it off. And then the fucking boobs showed up, and we still got to watch the movie, but there was arguments about it. We had to convince her to let us watch it. It was going to be all right. Getting somebody's throat slit, that's one thing. But you see boobies? No way. That's too far.
Yeah, no, exactly. Again, last one to touch on for you guys who are dying, but Predator.
Oh yeah.
Predator, and then Predator versus Alien was like it. That was like the epitome. But old school Schwarzenegger Predator again,
Right, and there's the number 2 that was mediocre that had Danny Glover in it.
Yes.
I mean, there's obviously been 100 Predator movies at this point, but the original with Schwarzenegger, that was the classic, and it gotta be. I mean, it's got to be one of the best monsters in horror movies.
Right. Oh, definitely. Well, this thing. So the original Predator, amazing, and then they came back with a whole new idea with that whole AVP, Alien versus Predator thing, and that really set the bar. I mean, that doesn't compare to other sequels. You know what I'm saying? That's like above and beyond as far as sequel level there. And yes, Jesse Ventura is.
That's right. We almost forgot Jesse.
Jesse Ventura, the Governor and Jesse.
Yeah.
So
right,
and that's the thing.
And
like,
both those guys became governor. Interesting.
I feel like they got their start in horror movies, and now you might point out, well, I don't really think that it was their start, but I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, it wasn't really either of them, was it? But
no.
Yeah. Oh man. So I think those are some of my favorites, though. I'd like to hear what everybody else likes, and with Halloween coming up, you gotta touch on some of the Halloween films for just 'tis the season.
That only sounds right. So let me wrap it up with the basic tips, right? So when there's bad people, turns out you can just leave. You might want to keep that in mind. I mean, that's a good like prepper survivalist thing, all in all. Now, the other thing is you can leave for now and then watch them and then go kill them from afar. That's always a nice go-to. Another takeaway from these movies. Now, the takeaway is lesson learned by don't do what these people did, right? It's not that, hey, I learned something from watching this movie. It's just realize people can be sick and twisted. But it turns out if you're more sick and twisted, you can turn the tables completely.
Right.
You just got to up the game. You got to embrace it. I feel like in real life, that's something that happens where people, they let fear overcome them and they just become completely paralyzed. And maybe desensitizing yourself a little bit with these movies might kind of open it up. If the first time you've seen blood is when you trip and fall running away from the bad guy, then that might, paralyze you a little bit. Whereas if you're exposed to things a little bit, it might, help you out. I think this is kind of why you train. This is why, we go out and we do all these different, tactical things where it becomes muscle memory. It becomes instinct and habit. Instead of reacting in fear, you're falling back on what you've already learned and what you already know. And I think that's kind of the takeaway to just kind of, we had fun with this episode, whatever. But the idea is you want to be able to kind of expose yourself to things and then be ready to go. And you do that by training and consistency and going out and preparing. And that's what it comes down to. So one, you guys need to make sure you like the Facebook page, wherever you saw this, that kind of stuff. If you could subscribe to our YouTube channel, that would be awesome. YouTube is, really big on, you got to do different things to, get attention, and you guys subscribing really helps us out. So make sure you do that. We appreciate it. Also, if you haven't checked out the podcast, maybe it's easier to listen to this show on the go. We're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, everywhere. Don't forget to check us out there. We'd really appreciate it. And obviously, if you subscribe, you're never going to miss an episode of this awesomeness because you had a good time if you're still here at this point. So do it for us. Also, preppingbadass.com. We have an email list. With that, I would say stay safe, and we will talk to you guys next week.